بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين اللهم إني نويت التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم يا الله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. So the Imam begins this next piece of advice by questioning the intentions of this student of his and asking him that, and there are some really interesting points in this passage. It's page 1415. Because the Imam says, أيها الولد كم من ليال أحييتها بتكرار العلم ومطالعة الكتب. That how many nights have you spent going over your learning, revising, reading books, and depriving yourself of sleep. وحرمت على نفسك النوم, and you've deprived yourself of sleep. Now, what's really interesting here is that firstly, layl in Arabic is the night time. And the night is when life goes quiet. It's when you tend to find, most people resting. Whereas if you look at the day is teeming with life, right? And compared to that, relatively speaking, or outwardly speaking at least, the night is dead compared to the day. But we have this beautiful concept in our tradition which is called Ihya'ul Layl, which literally means to bring the night to life, to give it life, ihya. To give, and so you can only give something life which you think is outwardly dead. And that's like we've mentioned before, Imam Ghazālī's book, Ihya Ulumuddin, and we've spoken about this, that the Ihya, he's giving life or bringing back to life. But what's he bringing back to life? Knowledge. But what type of knowledge? As we've spoken about before, not fiqh, not aqidah or nahu or any of the sciences, because they were alive and kicking even at the Imam's time. It's knowledge of Allah. And so one of the things that the night time is there for is to give it life, so we can pursue during the night our sort of cultivating our relationship with Allah to gain proximity to Him. So there's two things here. Number one is the idea of spending the night awake, which in itself is an incredible act of worship. And secondly, you're reviewing your work, your studies. So you'd think to yourself that, subhanAllah, what state must someone be in that they're waking up in the middle of the night, a portion of it is for worship, and then they're spending it in studying and reviewing and revising and going over their work. You'd almost think there's nothing to say to such a person. If we knew someone like that, we'll acknowledge them as being someone of a higher spiritual rank than us. But look what the Imam is saying to this person here. He's saying, لا أعلم ما كان الباعث فيه. He said, despite all this, I don't know what the motive you have in doing all of this. So he's getting down to the, right to the core. What are you doing it for? Because don't just think that just because you're waking up in the middle of the night, or And I should say, the fact that you're reviewing, revising, engaging in worship, that just by doing that you think, alhamdulillah, I must be of the salihin. He's saying no. What is the purpose of you doing all of this? And Imam says, إِن كَانَ نَيْلَ عَرَبِ الدُّنْيَا وَجَذْبَ حُطَامِهَا وَتَحْصِيلَ مَنَاصِبِهَا وَالْمُبَاهَاتِ عَلَى الْأَقْرَانِ وَالْأَمْثَالِ فَوَيْلٌ لَكَ ثُمَّ وَيْلٌ. That if it was winning the goods of the world and all of the vanities that the world has, and we're going to go through this in a second, to gather all the honors that the world can give you, and vainglory to the debit of your associates and peers, woe to you and woe again. وَإِن كَانَ قَصْدُكَ فِيهِ إِحْيَاءَ الشَّرِيعَةِ النَّبِيِّ صلى الله عليه وسلم. But if your objective, your intent in waking up and reviewing is to revive, it's the same word, ihya shari'at an-nabi. So just as you're giving life to the night time, what you're really doing is giving life to the sharia. Again, we're going to come back to this in a second. And to cultivate your soul, وَتَحْذِيبَ أَخْلَاقِكَ وَكَسْرَ النَّفْسِ الْأَمَّارَةِ, to the cultivation of your character and breaking the soul which calls one to evil. فَطُوبَ لَكْ ثُمَّ طُوبَ لَكْ, then blessings upon you and blessings again. وَلَقَدْ صَدَقَ مَنْ قَالَ شِعْرًا, he has told the truth who spoke the verse, and this is a line of poetry. سَهَرُ الْعُيُونِ لِغَيْرِ وَجْهِكَ ضَائِعٌ وَبُكَاؤُهُنَّ لِغَيْرِ فَقْدِكَ بَاطِلٌ. That sleeplessness of the eye for thy sake, but for thy sake, is vain. In other words, if you're keeping awake at night and it's not for the purpose of Allah, you're wasting your time. And their crying but for thy loss is inane. And if your eyes shed tear for any other reason except Allah, then they're a waste of, you shouldn't be doing them. Because don't forget, tears in Arabic, what are they called? Abarat. Right? What does abar? Abar literally means to convey or to cross over. And we've said this before, just as this is a language, English, Arabic, Turkish, all these languages that we hear or speak, tears are also a language. Because when we speak in Arabic, what do I say? I say, أُعَبِّرْ مَا فِي نَفْسِي, I'm conveying to you what's in my soul. The word I use in Arabic is ta'bir. عَبَّرَ يُعَبِّرُ ta'bir, right? Why? Because I'm trying to make a bridge between me and you. Abarat in Arabic is the same word for expressing, for tears. Why? Because it's a form of language. It's a language when you have no words left to express what it is that you want to say, because the depth of what you want to say can't be encompassed in words. And the only way you can convey it is by articulating this deep emotive state that when someone looks at it, no words are needed. You realize, okay, something big is going on here. There's nothing you can say. Likewise, when someone's overjoyed, it's a language. You can see this person is clearly in a state of happiness. And so all of the states of a human being, being melancholic, being joyful, God forbid being miserable, these are all languages. You're conveying things to people. We shouldn't forget that just as we can convey things in words, we actually convey a lot through things that we don't say. And in fact, if you think of, when you hear about when people tend to have issues, a lot of issues tend to arise from things that are unsaid because of what you perceive from someone that they're doing. It's not necessarily the words that they've said, it's the way that they said it, or they didn't say it, or the way that they acted or didn't act, right? Because it's a language that we're conveying. So it's about mastering that idea that when I'm around people, I need to pay attention to how I'm behaving. Now, so that's the first thing about the ihya al-layl, to give life to the night. And then if you do that, what do we say? In English we say the night time is ungodly hours. But for us it's godly hours. It's the complete opposite. Right? To spend the night awake. And so the Imam says that some of the misplaced intentions that someone can have, whether you're a student or anyone else, is you're doing all of this for worldly benefit. In other words, if you're doing something which outwardly should make you think that it's only for ibadah, and even that act can be corrupted by your worldly desires, then how about when you're doing things which are not in the middle of the night and are not outwardly ibadah? How much can they be corrupted then? Let's say, we're doing things during the daytime and we're trying to help people, we're trying to get better at whatever it may be, we're studying hard for some vocation, or what are we doing it for? Everything has to have an intention behind it. The thing is that when we look for work, do we look for work because it's going to pay us what we want? Or do we look for work because we believe the work is meaningful to us? And then I'm going to make my choice. Because if we're doing it based on money, then we shouldn't really have a complaint. We shouldn't complain that work was this and work is... Because people who tend to get jobs for money, you'll find that everyone else in those jobs is probably like you. And you're going to be competing with one another. You're going to be eating one another. You're going to be disagreeable because you're all wanting the same thing. There's only a few that can win in that world. But if you're doing it because you want to bring some benefit, then even in environments where it's competitive, you don't mind. You can get ahead of me because I don't want the dunya. I'm doing it because I believe there's something good in this. Or the Imam says you're doing all of this to secure vanities, status, position. For students of knowledge, I'm going to become a teacher. I'm going to sit here and teach. People are going to come to me for advice. People are going to come to me with their questions. I'm going to be respected wherever I go. Imam Razi says, the great Fakhruddin, he said it's enough of a test for you that people point and say, that's so and so. That's Shaykh so and so, or that's Nadeem. It's enough for people to say that, because what's the last thing that leaves the heart of a wali? Hubbul jah, they say. It's this love of status. It's the last thing that leaves the heart of a wali, they say. So if the awliya, for them, this is they're on a high pedestal as it is, right? High maqam, and then even for them, it's the last thing that leaves them is just this status. Because we all seek it, right? That's why modern media, it's successful because it preys on the very thing that we're weak at. We're weak because we want to be known. And we have these masterful excuses that we can make for why we do the things that we do. But what does Allah say? بَلِ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ بَصِيرًا. That people are well aware of who they are. وَلَوْ أَلْقَى مَعَاذِيرًا. And even though they're giving you outward excuses. No, I'm really doing it for this, I'm doing it for that. But what the reasons are, only we know. And so what did Sayyidina Umar say? He said, the Khalifa, one of the greatest companions, that رحم الله امرأ دل علي عيوبي. That may Allah have mercy upon the one who shows me my faults. Sayyidina Umar, the great. And we know that with Sayyidina Umar, that he's Al-Faruq, the one who distinguishes between right and wrong, the great just. We know the things about Sayyidina Umar. We know also that, for instance, that the Prophet ﷺ told the names of the hypocrites to which companion? Sayyidina Hudhayfa radiyallahu anhu. And the companions knew that the Prophet ﷺ had told them the names of the hypocrites. And right up until the time that Sayyidina Umar was old, he would ask Sayyidina Hudhayfa, I know you can't tell me who the names are, but am I one of them? As the person who's been promised paradise. Meaning it wasn't enough for him that he's been told that, what's the hadith? Umar fil Jannah. Because why? They recognize the soul. They recognize that this thing, what does Imam al-Busayri say about, have you ever seen a child when a child gets out of hand? A toddler, and it starts throwing its toys at the pram, as they say, to control a child. Imam Busayri, he says, وَالنَّفْسُ كَالطِّفْلِ إِن تهمله شب على حب الرضا. That souls are like a child, or your soul is like a child. When neglected, it will grow up and not want to leave the thing that it loves, which is the milk of its mother. It doesn't want to leave its mother's milk, right? وَإِن تَفْطِمْهُ يَنْفَطِمِ. But if you wean the child will be weaned. What's it trying to tell us? That your soul, what it's going to be is according to how you train it. As parents, we think that it's just about giving. Love is about, one present, two presents, as I've said, one pair of shoes, 3 ice creams a day, buying children Nike trainers that they're going to grow out of in literally 3 weeks, because they're growing at rapid pace, right? Because we think it's love, but that's not. It's in fact you're teaching them the complete opposite. So what the Imam is saying is that if you accustom a soul to the things that it wants and desires, because the modern world is about creating our desires and needs. We don't really have needs beyond living. But the modern world, it's masterful in how it creates, it makes us believe that we have needs, which we don't really have. And so if we're going to accustom a child that it's okay, you can have literally all that you want, and think that saying no and seeing it cry for a minute, I don't want to do that, that's somehow being mean. No, it's not. You're doing the opposite. So what you've done, you've exchanged short-term gain, don't want to see him cry, for long-term harm. But if you just bore with it, you'll realize that after a month, 2, 3, 4, your child will come to recognize, look, when my parents say no, it means no. But when they know that when I say something and my parents don't give it to me, as long as I keep persisting, that's all I have to do, keep persisting, they'll just buckle because they can't handle it. So there's a book that you want to read about this called Brand Child. And essentially what advertisers came to recognize is that, listen, adults have this was about 30 years ago, it might have changed now, but adults have the capacity to discern to some greater degree what they need and don't need. So sometimes to advertise to them is futile, because if they don't want it, they're not going to buy it. So let's change tack now, and let's advertise grown-up things, but to children. And we'll get the children to nag their parents to buy things, the car seat that they don't. So what does a child know about car seat? Right? Even the color of a car. So they'll talk about colors, and the children will then nag parents about a car. Or, now of course there's too many examples to even go through. This book, when it was first released more than 25 years ago, it was different. So this is what the Imam is saying. That look, we have to understand that the soul is like a child. And you have to train it, you have to wean it. And then what the Imam says about this person who's training to become a scholar or someone of knowledge is that by becoming knowledgeable, are you doing it to assert your superiority over your peers? Right? Either by thinking that, I have some standing with Allah that others don't because I've studied. Right? Or that you've kept the company of the great people of this deen and others haven't. Our brother Misbah will tell us, the great people in Sham, is you're just spoiled for how many people you can see, right? And so because of the sheer number of great people that you can spend time with, it does make you believe at some level that, yeah, subhanAllah, this is amazing, I'm able to spend all this time. And then it becomes part of your stories to people. And because people love to hear those things, you become the source of those great stories. You become someone of importance. So you have to see that, do I really want to tell people those stories? Because, is it going to put me in some position where I don't really want to be in terms of my nafs? Or are you doing it because you believe that becoming knowledgeable is going to equip you to dismantle someone's argument? Right? And the Imam makes it very, very clear that debate doesn't bring people to your position. If you believe in something and you have a position, Debate doesn't bring people to a position. Ideally, if it's done properly, it's well-intentioned, and people are coming to a debate with the right intentions, and in theory, you'll get a good outcome. The truth should prevail. But have you ever seen a debate, whether it's live or on the internet, where A, it's conducted with adab, B, that someone has accepted the position of the opponent at the end of it? No, because you can tell by the demeanor, it's not about truth. It's about, okay, look, I'm convinced that you're wrong. I just need to show it to you. And both parties are going at it like that. I'm convinced you're wrong, and the other party is convinced the other party is wrong. And that's our starting and finishing assumption. Everything else in between is just the moves that I can make in dialectic to convince you. That's already a mistake. It should be completely opposite. It should be, look, this is my position, and the only reason why we're debating it, because there's a difference of opinion. Especially if it's amongst Muslims, right? The fact there's a difference of opinion means that you've got some proofs for it. So I should be open enough to give you the respect and benefit of what you're following, of what your position is. And let's see. If Allah has guided me to have a position which has a stronger proofs, then firstly, I thank Allah. It has nothing to do with me. I had no input into that. We were guided to it by Allah. But if it's you, and I can see that that's the case, and may Allah, what does Imam Shafi'i say when he used to engage with someone in discussion or debate? That, oh Allah, make the truth manifest on the tongue of my opponent that I may submit to it. That's the Imams. That's true debate. And so what the Imam tells us here then is that if someone becomes accustomed to the ways of debate, dialectic, the mind will become used to that type of behavior, i.e. everything needs to be critiqued. Everything needs to be debated. Everything needs to be undermined. The other person doesn't really know what they're talking about. The reasoning of that individual is weak. What people don't recognize is that this isn't a sign of lack of knowledge, it's a sign of poor character. It's really important that we understand that. Knowledge should be confined to the places where knowledge is being shared, and we should inculcate a healthy understanding in the minds of our students about what knowledge is. Differences of opinion should be shared. I'll give you an example. Once we were sitting in a class with one of our teachers, and I'll mention Shaykh Mujil Khatib because I believe he's one of the great scholars of the world, that he wanted to make a point about something he had read in a book. And the Shaykh's memory is incredible, but he had to pull it off the shelf. We were sitting in a library taking this lesson, pulled the book off the shelf, and then he had his book like this. And what he did is that he put the book that he took off the shelf inside the other book, so we couldn't see the cover. Right? He said what he had to say without mentioning any name or any indication of who it was. And then what he did, because he's a very smart man, mashallah, and he knows his students, he closed the book when the lesson finished, and he walked out with the book that he had taken off the shelf still with him. Why? Because he didn't want to leave the possibility open that we might go and have a look. You see, it's a mind of a great teacher, someone who understands that giving tarbiyah is intrinsically linked with giving knowledge. You can't separate the two. You can't pretend that you're just teaching someone knowledge without giving them a correct comportment of how to behave. Now, but then why would people do this? Why would people fall into these traps? Because the Imam is saying something about this student of knowledge in the middle of the night. Because, as we've mentioned many times, that Allah has placed around us signs to such an extent that the entire created order, the cosmos in Arabic, is called alam. It's called the place of signs, right? But there are also impediments that can prevent someone from seeing those signs. Because it stands to reason, isn't it, that if the world is a place of signs, why does everyone not see them? But because Allah has put that there are impediments in place that essentially blind us from seeing. What's one of the biggest impediments that blinds us from seeing the signs? Kibr, pride. Because what's fascinating by kibr is essentially self-importance, pride. What you're doing essentially is you've lost the ability to discern and decipher the outside world because you're not looking at it, you're not interested, it doesn't bother you. You're too absorbed in who you are and your own importance. So what kibr, pride, has done is it's blinded you from everything apart from yourself. That's why it's such a major, flaw in someone's character, to be someone who has pride. And because it blinds us, it covers the heart. We can't see the signs anymore because we're not looking outward, we're looking inward. But then the Imam says, look, there are good intentions. If your intentions are to revive and teach the way of the Prophet ﷺ, what can be greater than that? But there's consequences for that. Because if we think that by studying and learning, and our intention is to revive the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the Sharia of the Prophet ﷺ, part of the consequence or the agreement to that is you can't put yourself out more than what you should. Doesn't matter if, look, one person comes, 100 come, someone accepts what you're saying, doesn't accept it doesn't matter. Our function is just to deliver. Allah is the one who will take it to the masses if He so pleases. Look at Murabat al-Hajj, Allah yarhamuhu, the great scholar of this past century. Is it imaginable that a man who lived in the deserts of the Sahara, in the Sahara desert, and his name is known all around the world? He didn't even know modern technology, phones, recorders. When they took a recorder to the desert to record some advice that he was going, they put a recorder in front of him. I've heard this from my own ears. They put a recorder in front of him, and he started giving advice, and he saw that they weren't writing. And he stopped, he said, why don't you write? And they said, no, this machine, it records your voice. He just didn't understand it. So he started again, and they weren't writing. And he said, look, why don't you write? Honestly, 3 times he repeats it. And they say to him, every time, Shaykh, this thing, it records what you're saying. He never seen anything like that. Right? A man who was so far removed, and when people said to him, why did you leave people and come to the desert? And he said, one of the things he said was, because people in places like cities and whatnot just backbite, and I just didn't want to be part of that. And lived in the desert for I think 7 decades, right? And look, a man who gave everything up for the sake of Allah, for the intention of wanting to raise the Sharia of the Prophet ﷺ, even if you go into the deserts, Allah will make people benefit from you. Right? So that's my point. It doesn't matter. You don't have to rush. Don't go about doing things beyond what you think you should be doing. Let things happen in their own course. But there's another consequence or inseparable idea in wanting to raise the Sharia of the Prophet ﷺ, as the Imam mentions, is to refine and cultivate our character. Without good character, there is no da'wah. Because da'wah in Arabic, as you know, it's the same word that we use in Urdu to invite someone to our house for dinner, ad-da'wat. Now, when you invite someone to your house for dinner, what's your approach to them? Right? You're going to think about a number of things here. You're going to think about, okay, pretend your house is Islam. So you can analogize the two things now. You're inviting someone to your house for dinner, you're inviting someone to Islam. So what are you doing? At this moment in time, your concern should be not you, but the other person, because now you are host and they are guest. What's the way to bring them into your home? So imagine you brought them into your house and you said, look, come to my house Friday night for dinner. Make sure, don't forget. And you've gone about it the nice way. They come to your house and you give them tea and biscuits. What do you think their response will be? They might not say anything, but do you think it's what they had expected from the big up that you had given them? Friday night dinner at my house, don't worry. Families, we're great cooks in our house. You've really gone all around. Right? And then what comes out is tea and biscuits. Do you think they'll come back the next time you ask them? Right? Unless there were some great biscuits. Most likely not. Dawah to Islam is no different. When you're inviting people to the house of Islam, you can't just give them the biscuits. You have to give them the 3 courses. And not just the 3 courses, but in the way that they like it. We have to understand who they are, what their backgrounds are, what they understand, how they grew up. In other words, before you start giving them dawah, you need to be tilling the soil of their heart, tending to it, understanding, meaning you can't just take seeds and just, oh, here's some earth, let me just chuck them in. No, you have to work hard to make the earth pliable, soft, amenable to take those seeds. If you just threw them, they're not even going to penetrate the earth. That's the same thing with dawah. You have to work on people's hearts to get them interested in what you're going to say so the seeds can be planted there. Let them be open to it. But what's fascinating about the word dawah in Arabic, you know what I'm going to say now? What are the 3 letters? The dal, the ayn and the waw. The dal, the ayn and the waw. What does it give us if we rearrange those 3 letters? Right? A fascinating combination of meanings. One of the meanings it gives us is wadda'a, wida'. It's the same word in Urdu, by the way. What does wida' mean in Urdu? Al-wida', goodbye. If your dawah isn't appropriate, it's goodbye. The same 3 letters, just rearrange them, it's goodbye. Right? But if you change the 3 letters in another configuration, you will get awada. And it's the same word where Eid comes from. In other words, if your dawah was good and proper and appropriate, it's like Eid. They're always going to want it. Because Eid in Arabic means to come around again and again. Ada ya'udu, to come around again and again and again. But there's more, because if you go through another configuration, you have adawa. What's adawa? Udu. It's making an enemy of someone. Because because someone say, how can I make an enemy? Because okay, let's just say I failed. Why would they become an enemy? No, it's not that. Everything you do as a Muslim is dawah. Everything. Whether you're consciously going out there to give it, or whether you're just walking on the street. Just your presence in the world is dawah. If by your presence people have understood about Islam something which is not appropriate to understand, or you've missed through your character, let's say our poor character sometimes, our ill behavior, what are we doing? We're creating enemies with our dawah, our natural dawah. So look at the word dawah in Arabic, with all of these different configurations and permutations. Is it not telling us exactly the consequences that can result from dawah, either if it's done properly or if it's not done properly? So this is what the Imam is saying to the student of his, that if you're spending these nights awake, then it should be with clear intentions. And intentions are important, as I said, because do you remember a few weeks ago when we said that you might think, well, why would we need to keep reviewing our intentions? Because think about it for a second. If you're walking from here to the masjid on a Friday, and it's for the Jummah prayer, in our minds we're thinking, well, I'm going to the masjid anyway. Why would I need to make an intention? You just autopilot. But believe you me, if you just compose yourself for a moment and say, I'm going to the masjid. I'm intended to go there. What will now happen, or should happen, is that you're not looking left and right. If you meet someone on the way, it's really from a distance, if you see someone. Because you're not there to say hello to anyone. You're on a mission. You're marching to the masjid. You're marching to Allah's prayer. So what you've done is that the consequence of these intentions is this: realign the way that you approach an act of worship now, as opposed to just thinking, yeah, but I'm going to the masjid anyway, that's an intention enough. In a sense it is, but in a sense it's not. Then the Imam says, أيها الولد عش ما شئت فإنك ميت وَأَحْبِبْ مَا شِئْتَ فَإِنَّكَ مُفَارِقُهُ وَاعْمَلْ مَا شِئْتَ فَإِنَّكَ مَجْزِيٌّ بِهِ. O child, live as long as you want. The English has, but you must die. That's correct, it's not incorrect. But the Arabic says, فَإِنَّكَ مَيْتٌ, you're dead already. The only thing of you which is alive is that which you give to Allah. If it's anything apart from that, it's like you're already dead. In fact, there's some say, I'm not sure if it's actually a hadith, but it's saying, النَّاسُ نِيَامٌ فَإِذَا مَاتُوا انْتَبَهُوا, that people are sleeping. When they die, they not wake up, they get brought to attention. Oh, this is real now. And love whatever you want, because you're going to be separated from it. And do whatever you want, because you will be repaid for it. Now, this is really important, because the Imam says that, look, love whatever you like, you're going to part from it. And in Arabic, it doesn't say man ahbabt, it's ma ahbabt. All things. And when we speak about things, you can love your children, you can love your wealth, property, cars, whatever it may be. Love your status. You could be company directors, high-flying executives, business owners, whatever it may be. Love your positions in the world. Love the fact that people look at us and talk about us. Love the attention, that all manner of different. Love whatever you want to love. Love it. Just know that you're going to leave it all behind, all of it. And mufariq is interesting here, because what it's actually trying to tell us, look, it's so deep, because it's saying, love whatever you want because you're going to be separated from it. What it's trying to tell us, that in the dunya, you actually don't own anything. Because the nature of ownership in the world is that whatever you own, take your house, in 100 years from now, the house that you live in, someone else is going to be living in it. Someone who's probably not even from your family. Just that thought. 100 years from now, maybe 50, the house that you live in, someone else will be living in it. The memories that you had are gone. They don't even know who you were. There's no recognition that this house once belonged to so-and-so. The car that we have will probably be a fork, because they're going to scrap it in 100 years or 50 years. The metal will be recycled, and your car will probably be spoons and forks. Right? And on and on. In other words, everything that we own, that we place value to, it's in a state of being perishing. It's not going to last more than a limited time frame. And so what the Imam is telling us is that, look, you are going to be parted from it, and so your role is, you're just a caretaker. You don't own anything. Your families are in your care. The husband towards the wife towards the husband, the parents towards the children. These are all relationships of amana, of trust. You don't own anyone. Sometimes our relationships get unstuck because we think we own people. We don't own anyone. Because what's the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ? كلكم مسؤول كلكم راء وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. That all of you are like shepherds, and each one of you is responsible for the flock that they care for. Now, have you ever seen a shepherd beat his flock? Never. The most that you'll see with a shepherd is a stick, but it's just to herd. And a shepherd may have a dog that helps to gather the flock. Because a shepherd understands that's a true, if you look at take a step back, the idea of a shepherd is that the shepherd is looking at the bird's eye. It's taking care of not only the immediate nutritional needs of the flock, but it's also keeping an eye. If there's any danger from the outside, it's keeping us safe. It's a blanket. But the shepherd never abuses the flock. The shepherd never harms the flock. The shepherd, in fact, expends its own time and effort to make sure that the flock is as it should be. Because the shepherd recognizes that if he or she abuses the flock, immediately the flock's not going to trust him. and it'll become wild. Good relations are always worked out on good character. Always remember that. If we think that relationships will be mended or worked on or cultivated by selfishness, by shouting, bad attitude, anger, it's not. It's going to destroy relationships. But if you're someone of the opposite demeanor, whereby you're calm, collected, it doesn't matter. People make mistakes, they are abd. You're not judging them. You can't judge them. Your job is just to nudge them slowly. Come this way. It's okay. Right? If you do that, you'll see that people are. And let's finish on this. What's the example that we see here? Sayyidina Anas bin Malik. We always say this, and why? Because we're talking about a child who's 10 years old. He's a khadim of the Prophet ﷺ. He serves the Prophet ﷺ in his home. And what did he say when people asked him about the Prophet ﷺ? Keep in mind, he's seeing everything inside the house. He said, never was there a time ever that I did something and the Prophet ﷺ said to me, why did you do it? And never was there a time that I didn't do something that I should have done that he said to me, why didn't you do it? He said, he would serve me more than I served him. That's the Prophet ﷺ. That's it. It's the beginning and the end for us. So these are, the Imams remind us to us. We haven't finished this little bit, but we'll continue on from next week, inshallah. That even the most loftiest of things that we can imagine, which is waking up in the middle of the night, studying the deen, if they can be hold potentially in that activity, then it stands to reason that anything else we do can be potentially hazardous for us as well. So we have to look well into it in terms of our intention. So inshallah, we'll stop here for today. And we'll take questions if there are.